Welcome back to the Everything is Black and White podcast, sponsored by fpro.com and NordVPN. All the details in the podcast description box, where you can get discounted offer on both products, which are brilliant to have. I'm Andrew Musgrove. I'm joined by John Gibson, and we're going to look ahead to Fulham's visit to St James's Park on Wednesday night in the quarter-final of the Carabao Cup. John, welcome back to the show. There's only one place we can stop because it does have a massive impact on Wednesday's outing, and that is your reaction to Newcastle United's defeat at the Stadium of Light to Sunderland on Sunday.
Well, I'm still reeling from it, to be truthful, Andrew. I mean, it was a shocking match, but we were worse than them. I mean, the match was awful, but we were worse than them. The quality of the game was absolutely nil. But what horrified me, I felt personally, there was no desire, no fight, and no pride. And that has been our trademark for so long, including high pressing, and that's part of desire and fight and pride. And, I'm not one of these that likes sorry from players afterwards or manager, because sorry is an easy word and I prefer actions. But Bruno wasn't far from the truth. I know that Eddie said today he was 90% truthful, and the 10% that wasn't was the mess, while he supported his captain, etc. But maybe it was an emotional outburst, but it was justified. We were horrible. We were our own worst nightmare.
Yeah, indeed. And I think that's the biggest frustration, is that you, me, and our viewers and listeners would give anything to run out onto that pitch. And if we got that opportunity, we would make sure that nothing was left in the tank. And yet Eddie Howe, after the game, said we left something on the pitch, and that's just not good enough. And what it does, John, it really turns Wednesday night into a must-win. Now, of course, it's a must-win in terms of progression to the next round of the Carabao Cup into the semi-finals. We want that. But now the expectation is there of a win, because they need to see a reaction from what happened on Sunday.
You know what, Andrew, and we've said this an awful lot this season, and the reason we've said it this season is we've gone up and down like a pogo stick. We've been up and then down, and then up and then down. And how often have you and I sat on a podcast and say, we need a big reaction in this next game because we were so bad, etc., etc. But you know what? We want more than a reaction in the next game against Fulham. We need a reaction full stop. We need a reaction over a period of time. We need to go on a run of consistently good results, hopefully with good performances. Not just a reaction. Fulham will get a reaction when in the semi-finals of the Cup, everything's hunky-dory and on we'll go to Chelsea and Manchester United away. No. Beating Fulham should be a gimme as much as anything can be if you go into it with the right shit, where the holders were at home. There's a semi-final place at stake. We've already beaten Fulham up here. It should be a gimme. But what isn't a gimme is everything isn't all right if we just beat Fulham. We have got to go on a run. This is getting to be unacceptable in huge 6-foot-high letters. We've got to start winning away from home. What's the matter with us away from home? We're absolutely puerile. It is not good enough to get a reaction on Wednesday. The reaction has got to go way beyond Wednesday. It's got to go over Christmas, over New Year, and into January. That's the reaction we want. I don't want a one-match reaction. I'm sick of one-match reactions. I'm wanting a long-term reaction.
Yeah. Let us know in the comments if you think that reaction is going to come over a period of time, because I agree with John. We have to see a consistent run of not only wins, but good performances. And Eddie Howe mentioned that in his press conference today. But I think the truth is, you could remove the date in reference to any opposition, and you'd be have 5 or 6 teams to choose from, in which you would link this to be in the pre-match press conference, which is a little bit concerning. I mentioned there about the need to win. Given how badly they played on Sunday, does that make it even more difficult for Newcastle United? Because you're not just thinking about winning, you're actually thinking about trying to rid yourself of the nightmare on Wayside.
No, I don't think it makes it more difficult because we're at home. And at home, they'll get up for it a little bit, and they'll do enough, and they'll win, and will give it a little bit of sleeves rolled up and that. And we're at home, and with respect, not a hugely difficult opposition. And we're at St James's Park, and we seem to manage to stagger through at St James's Park, but never ever when we're away. I don't think it makes it more difficult. I think that our problems are mental. I'm sick of having excuses like, oh, we'll play 3 matches in a week so we don't get much time on the training pitch. Don't Aston Villa do that when they play in Europe on a Thursday? And aren't they doing well in the league? Exceptionally well. Don't the teams we want to be that Manchester City or Arsenal, have a programme like that? There's nothing wrong with a programme of 3 matches a week. That's what's called success. That's what happens when you get into Europe. It's not an excuse. They all of a sudden, oh dear, we're not on the training ground enough, etc., etc. Oh dear, we've got injuries. Aren't injuries part and parcel of a season? Aren't they a bad thing? Of course they're a bad thing. But don't other teams have injuries as well? We've got to start sweeping away our excuses. What all the team have got to do as well, if I was Eddie, I would say to each one of them, go home tonight and look in the mirror. And look in the mirror and tell me what you see. And come back tomorrow morning and tell me you are as good as you think you are, or as good as your reputation is. Because the reputation, justifiably, we're grateful for what's gone on before. We're grateful for 2 Champions League campaigns. We're grateful for the trophy, which is already in the trophy cabinet, and we're defending it on Wednesday night. We're grateful for all that. But are 1 or 2 players now living on their past reputation? Are we as a team not as good as we think we are, and as the press and the fans have given them credit for being? Perhaps the simple answer, Andrew, is that we're not as good as that, and it's about time we accepted it. We're in the bottom half of the table. We might be in the quarterfinal of the League Cup, but that's because we've played Bradford City at home and Spurs. We haven't had a hugely difficult game. And the reason we're doing well in Europe is because we've beaten some of the average teams in Europe, like Benfica and the rest of them, where we won Union and things like that. Not Barcelona and Paris Saint-Germain and Real Madrid and etc., etc. I'm not downgrading what we've done. You can only beat what's in front of you. But let's not get carried away that we're this wonderful side in Europe and wonderful side in the League Cup and awful in the league away from home, etc. We're not as good as we have been. That is an absolute certainty. And we've got to get back to that. Impersonal pride comes into this. Each player should say, I've got a big reputation here, and it's getting a little bit tarnished, and I'm going to do something about it.
Are we in danger of getting too emotional about what happened on Sunday?
No.
I'm just playing devil's advocate here because I was fuming after the result, and I'm still very, very disappointed about how the players went about it. But a lot of the players, and it's easy to read too much into some of the reaction. Anthony Gordon received criticism for his Instagram post, in which he said, we can make up for it on Wednesday. Eddie Howe here has spoken about getting another opportunity to focus on, and that's a good thing for us after Sunday. Now, he's also talked about not getting too emotional. It's his job to stay detached from some of the reaction, which I can understand his point of view. Obviously, fans are very, very disappointed in what happened, but that's understandable, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I can understand what Eddie Howe's trying to do. He can't throw his players under a bus publicly. I mean, he might be doing it in private, but he can't do it publicly because he loses the trust of the players then, and the dressing room is struggling. But no, we're not getting too emotional. I mean, if you can't get up for the Sunderland game, what can you get up for? But this isn't a one-off, Andrew. We played badly at West Ham. We played badly at Brentford. We've played bad. If we had played super-duper all season, then turned in a performance like that at Sunderland, we could have said, oh, this is the biggest game because it is a derby, etc., but we're getting knee-jerk. Think of it in terms of the rest of the season, etc., etc. No, we're not getting over emotional because it has happened more than once this season. In fact, far too regularly. And you know why we're not getting over emotional? Because it isn't just the result. We didn't just lose a rip-roaring derby 1-0, where both sides were blood and thunder, were giving everything. There was huge excitement. There was some great skill. There was no skill. Sunderland were awful. The only trouble is we were worse. There was no skill. So we're not getting over much. We are, if you go out in a derby match and are so limp as we were, it is not emotional for us to react to that, because that should be a gimme, that you go out and you give everything. This is what's annoyed Bruno, and he's absolutely right to say so. And you know, I'm not meaning that he was Mr. Wonderful, but he at least he tried to drive them on, and that late in the game, etc., etc. It's not too emotional. It is the manner of defeat. As I say, if we'd lost a rip-roaring derby 1-0, we would have been absolutely decimated, but would said, hey, these things can happen, etc., etc. We lost it in the worst possible way.
Totally agree with you, and people watching and listening, don't come for me in the comments. I was just playing devil's advocate to try and get the other side of the opinion, but I agree with what John has said there. And I think it is important, because we're talking about their needing Fulham to be the first step in a long line of positive results and positive performances. And that's where the derby performance, we need to read more into it. And it's right to look at the bigger picture, because in isolation, it's bad enough. But actually, if we compare it to Newcastle on the road throughout the entirety of the season, it is really, really alarming that they can't get up for games away from St James's Park, and they can't better teams who are average. And that's no disrespect to Sunderland. They deserved the win. They were more up for it, and they're very disciplined, they're very organised. But on paper, man for man, you would argue Newcastle United probably have 8 or 9 better players, and yet none of them turned up. And you know, if we're just talking on passion and commitment, then Sunderland, you know, won that by way more than 1 goal, because they wanted it more. But the bigger picture, the more concerning picture, is that, like you say, it's not the first time, and it probably won't be the last.
No, and can I make a basic? By the way, I agree that when I say it was a poor game and Sunderland were poor, I'm talking about quality and ability and all that. They had huge hearts. They're very well organised. And this is a team that's just come up. It was supposed to be fighting a relegation fight. So 100% to them for what they have managed to do. I'm not having a go at Sunderland. I'm trying to use that as a means of where does that leave us. Now look at it this way, Andrew. This is, and I'm just picking on one simple fact from the derby. We played 2 forward lines, 2 front threes in that game with subs. We started off with Alanga, Voltemade, and Gordon. And then we had Murphy, Wissa, and Barnes all on the pitch. Add how much all that loss cost, and I don't know what the figure is, but it's absolutely huge, and they couldn't burst a balloon. On the day, all 6 of them couldn't burst a balloon. You know, Alanga, I'm sick of talking about it, and I'm not going to go into it. Is there any chance that he might show us something apart from pace to justify 50-odd million? Voltemade is shot. He needs a rest, and he's absolutely shot. And by the way, I will go back to say what I said originally. Why did we buy him in the way we play, to play centre forward when we're high press? He's got no energy, and he's not a pressing man. And by the way, if you think that's critical, read the comments of Alan Shearer, who knows a little bit about playing centre forward. And he said exactly that I've been banging on about. Gordon plays 1 and 6. Murphy, Wissa, Winoy, and Barnes. We had 6 strikers that cost a fortune on the pitch, and not one of them on the day could burst a balloon.
My calculations are correct. It's around £318 million that those 6 players have cost Newcastle United.
Half looked worth it, Andrew, didn't it?
Well, yeah, and I mean, they look better, and I say that through gritted teeth, because it wasn't much better, but it was an improvement with the second 3 that you mentioned. But I guess the question, John, is why weren't they firing? Why haven't they been firing pretty much all season, especially away from home?
That's a great question, and that's a question why Eddie gets all his money, and that's a question that's going to help uh, cement his reputation as a miracle worker, because he's terrific on the training ground. He's terrific in his man management, and when things are going right, it is his doing. But when they're going wrong, you've got to look to Eddie to put it right. And I mean, quite frankly, if you look all over the park currently, you're struggling in every position to justify anybody as being on top form. I mean, we're suffering horrendously because of Tonali's slipped off the end of the mountain, form-wise, be it because of injury, be it because of illness, whatever's the reason, he has slipped. Joe Linton's not the player that played last season in the Wembley Cup final and was sensational. Voltemade is not the player that just joined us from when he first joined us. Elanga's not the player that we paid so much money for. Gordon's not consistently the man that won his first England caps. We're struggling in all departments, and there's got to be a reason for it. And for a start, one of the reasons, Andrew, and I'm just thinking off the top of my head as we're talking, we have done sensational in the transfer market since the takeover. Sensational. The summer transfers, haven't as yet come off. Voltemade is a wonderful player, but not a centre forward. We all know that. We don't have to go into it. And he's finding it a lot tougher now because he's played game after game after game after game than he did when he first come. So the jury's out there. Ramsey can't even get a start in his 40-odd million. Elanga is a disaster, and Ramsdale's just a cover goalkeeper. So the summer deals, Chow has been the exception. Chow's been wonderful. But if you look at the side now, Andrew, in my humble opinion, two of the outstanding performers we have got, Chow and Livramento, are beginning to get pulled down into the bog of everybody else. They're not looking what they were 3-4 games ago. It happens. It happens when you're in a struggling side. But even the diamonds are beginning to look unpolished now.
And given that, because I agree, and you could throw Bruno into the mix as well, I think, with that. In an ideal world, Newcastle obviously win the derby. They go into this game, and Eddie Howe can rotate, but thinking of it in terms of the next game coming up, resting legs because it's the game plan. But given that we must see a reaction, does that change his potential team? I mean, if we forget the back four for a moment, John, because we're going to talk about that a bit more in depth in a second because of the injuries and all that. But just in general, like if he was thinking about rotating the wingers, or he was thinking about dropping or resting Voltemade, can he now not do that because he needs to actually play his strongest team possible and forget about Saturday against Chelsea? It's all about Wednesday because we need to see a win.
Of course it is. Of course, the derby result and performance ripped up any plans he had already made, because everything went out the window. If you look at that side's performance against Sunderland, there's only about 3 of them that you could say deserve to start in the next game. Now, you're not going to get that many changes because we haven't got that many people over the back four, for example, in the goalkeeper, to be able to do that. But nobody's justified. Nobody's leapt onto the team sheet straight away. I mean, I'm bemused on what team you pick. I don't know what team to pick because they've all been of some degree of hopeless. So I don't know what team to pick. But certainly you can't worry about Chelsea. Forget about Chelsea, because I'll tell you one thing. If we're going to win anything this season, it's the League Cup, where we'll be in the semi-final if we win this against good opposition. And this is a real chance. If you feel you got a bad reaction fan-wise by losing the derby, follow it up by losing at home and getting knocked out of the League Cup, where you hold us, and see what the reaction will be. What will the mood be Thursday morning if we lose this game? So you can't think about anything but fielding what you consider your best side against Fulham, because they must be beaten. That's the first small step of a lot of steps that's needed towards redemption.
And I say, can't change the wingers, but if it was me, I'd be changing the wingers, and it'd be Jacob Murphy on the right and Harvey Barnes on the left, because Anthony Gordon, he scored a few penalties. He looked back to his best against Bayer Leverkusen, and it was kind of game by game. He was just kind of looking like he was going to get back to his best. But that performance on Sunday was absolutely shocking. And look, Eddie has tried the tactic and approach of playing Gordon in the next game after he's had a bad performance, because I think he thinks that's, the best way to get him back to his best. This is your game, go and prove everybody wrong. But for me, he's had too many opportunities like that. You've got to send a message now to Anthony Gordon, and it is, you did not pull your weight against Sunderland. You think you're a big-time player. You're not looking like it. You haven't earned your spot here in a really important game. I know how good you are, but it's not about ability. It's about it's about showcasing that ability on the pitch and making sure that you are playing to your ability, and you're not doing it. So I'd have him on the bench. I think, Murphy and Barnes did enough, again, enough, John, to get a place in the starting 11. But the back line, it is a major concern, because usually in these episodes, we'll talk about changes here or there, who's going to play alongside Malik Chiao. Eddie Howe has absolutely zero option. It has to be Fabian Schär. And Newcastle United are one injury away along that back four from a fully blown crisis. And it's at this moment in time, they've got 4 players to choose from to field the back four.
Yeah, goodness. I mean, he's got a fully blown crisis with the whole of the team at the moment, to be truthful. But I take exactly what you're saying. In terms of personnel at the back, with the news of Burns going to be out 4 to 6 weeks. We have no real cover at fullback because of Trips and Kraft. And now we haven't at centre half. I mean, long term, not for Wednesday, short term, because we're talking short term. The only changes I've got is young Murphy is covering the centre half positions. The other Murphy, Jacob, can play right wing back, but you've to be in the 3. I mean, the 2 long shots we've got for the back is that the forgotten man, Jamal Lascelles, who's had a muscle problem, evidently. He just was the invisible man. We just didn't know where he was. He just didn't even get on the bench. But he's had a muscle problem, but he's back training with the first team. He can cover. I'm not talking about Wednesday. I'm talking about beyond. He can cover that. And I mean, I don't know what clutching his straws here. Could he bring Target back from Middlesbrough? He's on loan. Has he got? Is the contract, the on loan contract, for a full season, no returning, or can they return him in January? I don't think he would necessarily want to come, because he's on the verge of trying to help Middlesbrough win promotion. He's playing every week and he's a star. If he come back, he would do what Dubrovka did for us when we stopped him going to Saudi. He would cover us and then disappear into the wild blue yonder mediocrity again, never to be seen. But I mean, we are into that position. But I'll tell you something as well, Andrew. As big a problem as the back 4 is, so is the midfield without injuries. So is the midfield. What's happened to Tonali? I can't recognise him. I mean, if he didn't look the same person, and he doesn't look a happy bunny, but he was never looked a bundle of laughs, did he? Bless him. That's not the way he appears. But I mean, what's happened to Tonali? Joe Linton, we've talked about regularly. The famed middle 3 of Bruno, Tonali, and Joe Linton, they just pick themselves automatically, and only ever so infrequently one of them was given a little rest, somebody brought in, and then back they come again. That's been shattered. That is no longer. We used to say it was the best midfield in the Premier League. It is not now, in my humble opinion, the best midfield at Newcastle United, Andrew.
Yeah, I think many people would agree with you on that, John. They've really fallen away, and I think what we have to see going forward, and the example on Wednesday, if Joe Linton is actually fit, I think he was probably there for more of a morale boost on Sunday. But even if he's fit for the game on Wednesday, I wouldn't be playing him, because I've spoken to a Fulham podcast, and you can catch the view from the opposition later, and he says Fulham are just going to rock up and try and frustrate. And in his opinion, the game plan will be tried to get it to penalties in many ways. So we know that spells bad news for Newcastle, because teams just have to sit in a low block and Newcastle can't unpick them, especially with Joelinton in the midfield. So even if he's fit, doesn't start for me. My midfield three would be Bruno, Miley, and then Jacob Ramsey. I think, Joe Willock seems to be ahead of Ramsey in the pecking order, and there must be a reason for that we don't see. But he's not pulling up any trees. Tonali, I think, needs just to be taken out and just needs a rest. Eddie Howe's spoken on the fact that he's had an illness, then he's picked up a knock. He said he's had a bit of a bitty few months of late, and we can all see that he's not himself. But I think take him out of the starting 11 for this game, and hopefully he might be feeling a bit better for Chelsea. But that'd be my midfield three.
Yeah, I mean, to be truthful, I made a bigger loss than I've ever been this season in trying to pick a Newcastle side, because every time in my mind I pick a Newcastle side, I've put a player in and then I think, nah, he's not worth it. He shouldn't be in. And I can't pick an 11 with any sort of real feeling that this would do the business. Because, and you know what? Your best chance of getting picked against Fulham was not to be in the starting 11 at Sunderland, because you become a better player because the man that started was hopeless. So the people that weren't in that starting side, like Barnes and like Murphy and like Ramsey or whatever, have got a better chance because they're less tainted at the moment. But to be truthful, Eddie is on a hammer to nothing in this game, because whatever side he picks, he can't have 100% faith in it, in the individuals I'm talking about. And everybody needs to do the business. But I want to reiterate that, we'll get the usual glib, easy phrases after we beat Fulham, even with some sort of difficulty. Oh, Newcastle bounced back. They're in the semi-finals of the League Cup. Yes, after playing 3 home ties, etc., etc., etc. We don't bounce back by beating Fulham. Sorry, I'm not going to give that escape route to the players, because they don't deserve it. We bounce back when we've put a run of 6 games on the belt, 4 wins and 2 draws, or 5 wins and 1 draw. That's when we'll bounce back. We don't bounce back against Fulham, but we sink if we don't get the job done. And it's all or nothing on the night. We can't draw because it goes to penalty kick out. It's all or nothing on the night. And we've got to get through. Thinking of us not getting through is just a nightmare.
Yeah, indeed. It's unthinkable. Just as it was on Sunday that Newcastle United lose this game. We mentioned there the back four just briefly. Eddie Howe has said that Trippier and Kraft will be out till the new year. Obviously, as John said, Byrne could miss up to 6 weeks, and Jamal Lascelles is just returning from a muscle injury. So that's where Newcastle United's lack of options at the back four come from. It wouldn't surprise us if we see maybe Kyle Heffernan on the bench. He's captained the youth side for the last couple of years. He's a decent enough player, so this could be an opportunity for him to maybe get a few minutes up front. John, Valdemar, fantastic header, by the way, that he scored on Sunday. Just unfortunately,
I tell you what, that was a real centre forward's header. Unfortunately, it was at the wrong end. I mean, he died. He hasn't scored with a better header this season. Only thing is that his neck was the wrong way around, and he headed it past his own keeper. I mean, it was absolutely that was just about our only shot on target, wasn't it? Only the target was our target. I mean, indeed, what a disaster that was. Yeah, you go to bed on the night before dreaming of being the winner the next day. If you're playing centre forward for Newcastle, then you turn out to be the winner the next day, but for the other side. I mean, can you believe it? It is absolutely. I mean, he is desperate for a rest, but can he get a rest? The only way he can get a rest, if we started, he would be lucky to last a half time. Physically, I mean, at this stage, if how sharp he is, and bearing in mind he had no pre-season, etc., etc. If he started, and that's the obvious thing to do, But if he started, he'd be lucky to get to half time. He could never last 90 minutes, of course. So the only other thing is your old mate, who we want to make an example of, Gordon, is playing a false nine if it's decided that Voldemort leads the rest. And by Jove, doesn't he? Whether we can afford to give him one's a different kettle of fish, but by Jove, he looks as if he's on his last legs.
So Eddie Howe in the press conference, he was asked whether Yohan Wissa would start tomorrow. And he said, I'll make a decision on that in consultation with everybody else. We have to see whether he can execute what we need him to do. I wouldn't be surprised if Gordon does start up top. And I
agree. I agree that I think he could well start up top, Andrew. And I wanted to lead you into that one, because Wissa can't. Wissa, if he's going to make an impression, Wissa is going to make an impression coming on during the second half, and therefore have something in the tank when the opposition have got less in the tank because they've played an hour or whatever. And if you want to rest Voldemort, then by Jove, he may as well be rested on his performances he's managing to put out now. He looks as if he's ready to go on an iron lung on the final whistle. If he is to be rested, then it's Gordon 9, and then you've got your two wingers, as we've said. None of which, by the way, when I get the team sheet and I say Voldemort centre forward, Gordon centre forward, or Wissa centre forward, I will be dismayed, because there's a reason with all three. And with respect to Wissa, I wouldn't be dismayed if it was the proper Wissa, but of course he's not quite ready for that yet. So whoever plays centre forward is not going to fill me full of confidence on kickoff.
Yeah, which is not the feeling that we want. And on kickoff, John, I mean, the first 10, 15 minutes is going to be really, really interesting, because I think everyone will go, we'll sing the Blade and Races, we'll cheer the team onto the pitch, and we'll have a massive roar kickoff. And of course, we'll all be behind the club and the players. You know, the clue is in the name, Newcastle United. But an early goal in this game for Fulham, or maybe even just the first 50-50 and Fulham win it, the crowd, I think, will start to get a little bit nervous. And it's going to be so intriguing to see whether Marco Silva and his side can use that to their advantage, because I think there will be an undercurrent of nerves from the fans, simply because of the knock-on effect from Sunday, where it's not just about winning this game to progress, it's about putting in a better performance and winning this game as the first very small step to ridding themselves of what happened on Wearside.
Yeah, if they don't put in a better performance than they did at Sunderland, they don't win the game. That's an absolute certainty, because they couldn't win a raffle the way they were at Sunderland. They just wouldn't win the game. So they've got to put in a better performance than that. You're right. Silva will be talking to his players and say, look, you dampen the crowd down in the first quarter of an hour. You get the crowd twitchy, and half the game's done. We said in this podcast before the derby, one of Sunderland's biggest assets against us is the crowd, who are so up in the first season in the Premier League for Yonks. They're so behind the team, because they see the team giving blood, sweat, and everything for the club, and therefore now the same will happen with the Newcastle fans. They'll get behind them, and if they start like an express train, they'll roar them on, and everything will be hunky-dory. But if they don't, then we are really going to be twitchy. And you know what? One of the arguments we had for why we might, I don't mean you and I mean all Geordies, for why we might win the derby is, when the big games come along, Newcastle always get up for them. There's no bigger game in Sunderland to win. They didn't get up for it. And that's another thing that's alarming. And that's another thing why we're not knee-jerking on making a drama out of a molehill, because it is a drama. It is a drama. And, you know, can you imagine if we went out the League Cup? And by the way, I hasten to add that my forecast is going to be that we aren't going to go out the League Cup. At this stage, the semi-final would be very different, because the other three teams will be top quality, and we'll have to be bang on like we were last season when we beat Arsenal home and away in the semis. We'd have to be bang on like that again. But, you know, we have got to start looking like what we tell ourselves we are. This is if somebody had fallen off the moon and come to watch Newcastle United now and then read all the stuff about what a good team we are and how good we are and how vibrant we are and how we attack at pace and how we high press. If they read all that and then watched us this season, the good times as well as the bad, they wouldn't recognise our description of Newcastle United, and we've got to get back to that because the vast majority of the players are the same players who last season won the League Cup and qualified for the Champions League.
I have to say, I don't think they are going to get back to that. I think, as I mentioned, they're trying to be something else. Anyhow, said in his press conference this morning that they are trying to morph into something else, and that is clearly impacting them. But look, John, we talk about the negatives and losing to Sunderland. There's no bigger negative than that, and that performance was worthy of all the criticism that has come the players' way, and the calls that they have made on the day. But Newcastle United set for a playoff in the Champions League, you would argue, potentially into the semi-final of the Carabao Cup if they manage to beat Fulham. They are, what are they, 6 points off 4th place in the Premier League? You beat Chelsea.
Yeah, 6 points in a million miles. 6 points in a million miles.
And I'm being overly optimistic and overly positive and clutching at straws, some might say. But, let's flip it. Let's say they beat Fulham and let's say they then go and beat Chelsea. Things won't look as bad. And I actually don't think things look as bad as people maybe make out to do at this moment in time. But if the results go the right way over the next couple of games, Newcastle United have something to build on and there is light at the end of the tunnel, right?
Yes, but yes and no. Yes, there is. And yes, that's the way we react. And that's the way we fans, because we want it that way. Oh, right, okay, we're back. Let's keep going. And that's the way they react, I suspect. In the dressing room, the players, we've put it right. These 2 wins. Come on, lads, we're okay now. And off we go. I tell you when we'll put it right. Not when we beat these 2 this week because we're at home and we should. We'll put it right when we go and win at Manchester United and Burnley. The games that follow. That's when it's put right. We win these 2 games, everything's positive, you said, and all that, and I follow all that, and I'm a Geordie like you, and therefore I'll be full of optimism. I tell you what, let's see what we do when we go away in the 2 games after that, Man United and Burnley. That'll show us where we are, because you do not get beaten those 2 games if you're talking about us being up and running again. You do not get beaten the next 2 away games. Do that, and then we can start all patting each other on the back.
Come on, then. You've already kind of said how this game's going to go, but just confirm for us the result on Wednesday.
Yeah, Newcastle will win, but they will win with difficulty, and that's fine. The biggest thing is that they'll win, and the only reason I say they'll win is that they're at home. And they've got 50,000 Geordies who might be capable of turning on them, but is equally capable of ushering them over the line with a wave of love and enthusiasm. Because come what may, the whole of the crowd and the Geordie media, who are Geordie, want Newcastle United desperately to be successful. I do. It doesn't blind me, but I'm desperate for it to be successful. And therefore, at home, we can get something of a love-in going. We will manage to beat Fulham, and then we could easily beat Chelsea because they're iffy. They've got a manager that starts trouble in an empty house with the way he's gone on recently, etc. My test will be, how do we do with Man United on Boxing Day? And they're not unbeatable. And Burnley, everybody beats them. So how do we do with Burnley? Those 2 results will be the 2 results that tell me a lot rather than the next 2. But for those 2 away to count, we've got to win the next 2. And as I said, I honestly believe that we will be in the semi-final of the League Cup. Then comes a big test because we need 2 games like we had last season, 2 performances and results like we had last season against Arsenal.
Relying on the home form, and it's been brilliant, but it makes me slightly nervous. Kind of when I hear you kind of really confident, and I guess you're going to come back and say I'm not overly confident. It just makes me feel a little bit uneasy, John. Kind of like how you're kind of just saying, yeah, beat Fulham, and we should beat Chelsea because we're at home.
We won't beat Fulham easily, and we could easily get beaten by Chelsea. But I'm not afraid of Chelsea. I'm more afraid of Manchester United and Burnley away.
If you had the chance to sit down with the players before they went out, and we often do this for the big games, the finals and the derby, but if this feels like a big game, this feels like a match in which Newcastle have to win, and it's bigger than actual progression into the next round of the cup. I mean, just briefly, John, what would your message be to them?
Well, I would meet them all as they came through the door into the ground before the game, and I would say, by the way, lads, before we go in the dressing room, we're all going to walk upstairs, and I would march them all upstairs, and I would let them walk past the trophy cabinet and look at the League Cup, the Carabao Cup, and I say, see that there? Can you remember beating Arsenal home and away? Can you remember beating Liverpool at Wembley? Can you remember bringing that home and the way the crowd were and how much that means? That is ours. Are you going to give it up easily? Do you want it again? Do you want to be remembered as the team that lost to Sunderland, or do you want to be remembered as the team that won back-to-back League Cups? Tonight's the first step towards doing that. If you want to do the second, I would take them down in the dressing room. I'd say, get changed. I don't have to tell you anything else. By the way, the team's pinned up on the notes board over there. You shouldn't have to tell them what they remember from Sunderland and what they would see if they saw that cup and remembered how they got it and how adored they were for getting it. It's only a few months ago. It's not 12 months ago. Show them the cup. Tell them that goes tonight on the coach with Fulham back to London and to the FA if we don't win. Are you going to win or are you not?
Fingers crossed they do win. And we're talking about Newcastle United into the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup. Thanks, John, for popping on to the podcast and providing the match preview. Big thanks to NordVPN and FPro.com for their sponsorship of the show. All the details are in the podcast description box, and you can get a discount offer on either product as a thanks to you guys for sticking with the Everything is Black and White podcast. John will be back on Thursday to preview the Chelsea game. We'll also have Mark Crothers back on Thursday morning to look back, hopefully, on victory over Fulham, as well as the view from the opposition of Fulham and the view from the opposition against Chelsea. I mean, the episodes just do not stop coming. Thank you for sticking with us. I hope you do enjoy them. For me and John, we'll see you guys very soon.